Welcome to our channel. In this video, we are going to talk about top 10 videos of the worst floods in the USA. So before starting, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. Floods, one of the most devastating natural forces on the planet, have caused several calamities throughout history. From ancient Mesopotamia to China, to Maya peoples and Aboriginal tribes in Australia, the story of a devastating flood, a metaphor for a cleansing of humanity's sins, appears in many civilizations. Last year, flooding was the most fatal form of meteorological occurrence in the United States, killing 116 people. According to National Geographic, floods cause around $6 billion in damage in the United States each year. Because those locations are sensitive to storms, much of the severe flooding in America has occurred along the Mississippi River and in Texas, as well as along the Gulf Coast and in Florida. Floods have altered our nation's history, wiping away some villages for good and driving others to relocate to another region of the country. The Weather Network predicted normal or above-average rainfall east of the Mississippi River and in the southwest for this summer in June. With that forecast, and the looming threat of catastrophic flooding that comes with hurricane season, 24/7 Wall Street has compiled a list of the 10 worst floods in American history. 13. Brazos River Flood. Beginning June 17, 1899, rain rained for 11 days in a row in the Brazos River Basin. Rainfall totals in Texas reached over 9 inches that week, covering 66,000 square miles. The Brazos River spilled its banks, flooding 12,000 square miles of the surrounding area. In July, floodwaters in Richmond would reach a height of 58 feet. It would not be the region's last flood-related disaster. 12. Oregon Heppner Flash Flood. On June 14, 1903, a brief period of heavy rain and hail in the Blue Mountains created a fatal flash flood in Heppner, Oregon, drowning 324 people. Waters reached a height of 40 feet, saturating the town. The death toll might have been far higher if towns in the path of the floodwaters hadn't been notified in advance and citizens had time to flee. Because the local meteorological station was damaged in the flood, it's unclear how much rain fell during the disaster. 11. Miami hurricane and flooding. It was bad enough that the Florida real estate market had crashed in the mid-1920s, but then, on Sept. 18, 1926, one of the greatest storms ever hit Florida and the Atlantic coast. The hurricane-prone area was hit by a fatal storm surge and floods as a result of the storm. A tidal wave rushed through Miami Beach and Biscayne Bay, scattering vessels throughout the city. The hurricane killed 372 people and injured up to 6,000 more. Although reports from ships in the vicinity had given some early warning of the approaching hurricane, few people had radios in 1926, and there were few ways to get the word out to the general public. To that point, property damage in the United States has never been higher. 10. The Ohio River Flood. How catastrophic was the 1937 Ohio River Flood? The flood surpassed all prior floods over the 175 years of civilization settlement of the lower Ohio Valley, according to the NWS. The flood began in late January 1937, with record rainfall in river cities including Louisville, Kentucky, 20 inches, Evansville, Indiana, 15 inches, and Cincinnati, Ohio, 14 inches. According to the NWS, 70% of Louisville was flooded. According to the Cincinnati Enquirer, 1/5 of Cincinnati was flooded. As the water level rose, gas tanks exploded and oil fires erupted along the river's banks. 9. Labor Day Hurricane. Because of the real estate collapse and severe weather disasters, the 1920s were a tough time to live in Florida, and the Labor Day hurricane of 1935 added to the misery. The Category 5 storm wreaked havoc on the Florida Keys, with storm surges reaching up to 20 feet above sea level. The railroad that connected the Keys to the rest of the country was dismantled. World War I veterans who were working on a roadway and living in federal rehabilitation centers were among the many who died. Ernest Hemingway went to the Keys after the hurricane to assist with the recovery. He was so appalled by what he witnessed that he wrote a scathing magazine piece titled, "Who Killed the Vets?" 8. St. Francis Dam Failure. After the San Francisco earthquake, the St. Francis Dam failure was the second worst disaster in California's history, and it was one of the worst dam failures in American history. The dam was designed by self-taught civil engineer William Mulholland and completed in 1926. More than 12 billion gallons of water were stored in the 1,300-foot dam, enough to sustain Los Angeles for a year. However, the dam's integrity was a problem from the start. The dam keeper spotted muddy leaks pouring from the dam on the morning of March 12, 1928. Mulholland and his chief assistant were summoned, and they inspected the dam and declared it safe. The dam keeper and his 6-year-old kid would be the first drowning victims 12 hours later when the dam gave way. Until it reached the Pacific Ocean, the wall of water would surge 54 miles. 7. Statewide Ohio flood. In late March 1913, the deadliest weather storm in Ohio history happened, killing 467 people and flooding 40,000 dwellings. The flood was caused by excessive rainfall across the state. Rapidly flowing water up to 10 feet deep surged through Dayton's central streets, killing 123 people. 100 more people died downstream on the Miami River in Hamilton, where the water surged to as high as 18 feet. Another 100 people were killed in Columbus, with survivors being plucked from trees and rooftops. The Ohio River rose 21 feet in 24 hours at Cincinnati. Following the 1913 flood, the Miami Conservancy District established flood control reservoirs in the hopes of preventing a repeat of the disaster. 6. New England hurricane and flooding. One of the most famous nor'easters of all time struck eastern Long Island on Sept. 21, 1938, before wreaking havoc on New England. It was a fast-moving storm with a wind speed of 47 miles per hour, and it dumped up to 7 inches of rain, according to the NWS. Unprotected beaches were overwhelmed by tidal waves of at least 50 feet high, as recorded in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and the deluge turned cottages into matchsticks. At least 700 people were killed and 2,000 others were injured in the region's deadliest disaster. More than 63,000 people have been displaced. Nearly 20,000 structures were destroyed, and 100 bridges had to be rebuilt. 5. Hurricane Katrina flooding. Part of Katrina's tragedy stems from how humans have changed the landscape around New Orleans. When French settlers first arrived in New Orleans 300 years ago, the city was above sea level, but swamp drainage has caused the city to sink. The city's poorest residents have traditionally lived in areas below sea level, which are more vulnerable to flooding. Furthermore, the Army Corps of Engineers developed a system of levees and seawalls to protect New Orleans from floods. The levees, however, broke when Hurricane Katrina struck on August 29, 2005. As a result, the city flooded to the tune of 80%. It was the most expensive hurricane in American history. 4. South Carolina Sea Islands hurricane. People did not have the kind of weather forecast and warning system that we have now in the late 1800s. South Carolina, and particularly the Sea Islands that form a barrier along the state's coastline, were caught off guard by a hurricane on August 27, 1893, for this reason. The cyclone wreaked havoc on the coastal island surrounding Savannah, killing almost 2,000 people. The majority of the people died as a result of drowning. Almost every structure on the Sea Islands was destroyed, and 30,000 people were forced to flee their homes. 3. Johnstown flood. A dam near Johnstown ruptured on May 31, 1889, after many days of heavy rain. Even today, the magnitude and extent of the ensuing deluge are impossible to understand. A total of 2,209 persons were killed, including 99 families. Bodies have been discovered as far as Cincinnati. Flood lines were drawn up to 89 feet above river level, and the wave that hit Johnstown was estimated to be 40 feet high. The South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, which included industrialists Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick among its members, owned the dam but avoided liability. Historians and legal experts believe that public outrage over the failure to find fault in the tragedy prompted the United States to enact stricter liability laws. It was the first time the American Red Cross was involved in a major disaster. 2. South Florida hurricane and flood. Florida was whipsawed by another tempest in late September 1928, barely 2 years after absorbing the impact of a hurricane that ravaged Miami. A storm that claimed the lives of more people in the state than any other natural weather event. About 6,000 people lived in a farming community on the southern shore of Lake Okeechobee, and nearly half of them would perish in the storm. A 5-foot mud dike built to keep Lake Okeechobee at bay collapsed, unleashing a tidal wave. Because so many people were killed so quickly, and the bodies decomposed so quickly due to the heat, the the survivors were forced to burn the bodies. More than 600 African Americans were buried in unmarked graves in a pauper cemetery in West Palm Beach. 1. Galveston hurricane and storm surge. The Galveston hurricane of 1900 was the country's deadliest natural disaster. 8,000 people are thought to have died as a result of the Category 4 hurricane's high winds, 15-foot storm surge, and flooding. However, the actual number of people could be as high as 12,000 people. Despite the storm's strength, many of the deaths could have been avoided. The storm was expected to hit much further east, according to the Weather Bureau, which later became the National Weather Service. Residents and many vacationers ignored warnings from Cuba about the storm, and the city was largely unprepared for the hurricane that slammed into it on Sept. 8, 1900. Galveston was once a thriving port city, but the hurricane's devastation was too much for the city to recover from, and investors shifted their attention to Houston instead. So that's it for today. What do you think of our video? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and would like to hear more from us, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications before you go. Thank you so much for watching us.